Hi guys, and welcome to my sacred little space. My little space where I can find peace and meditate, and where a lot of that magic kind of happens in my daily life. It's really great to have a space like this, and my hope for you is that you can find a little space that's good for you when you want some alone, some quiet time to really get to the heart of the truth. My name's Jonathan Floyd. Most people know me as Johnny, and I'm a meditation teacher in Shropshire in the UK. And that's not the only thing that I do. I do a lot of different things, but for all of my life I've been on what I would describe as a spiritual quest. I've been looking for the truth, the spiritual truth in life, and that's led me to study all kinds of things, all kinds of religions, all kinds of spiritual traditions. It's taken me to some weird and some wonderful places over the years. And for a long time in my own particular life, I would have actually classed myself as a fundamentalist evangelical Christian. I don't subscribe or associate with any particular religion nowadays, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a spiritual person. In fact, I would categorically state to you that I am the most spiritual now that I have ever been in my life. That this journey that I've been on since a young age has meant that I now understand that my whole life is a journey of exploration, of discovery, and more than anything in my life, I want to actually find the definitive truth. So if you are interested in searching for the truth, for spiritual truth, for spiritual awakening, spiritual enlightenment, all of these kinds of things, then you will share a common ground with myself, because I am also on that journey along with you. I'm not going to tell you that I'm an expert in any one particular tradition, any one particular set of beliefs. I'm not going to label myself and say I am a Christian, I am a Buddhist, I am a yogi, I am a pagan, I am a druid, I am anything at all. All of these things and so much more of the whole world's culture and philosophy and belief system interests me immensely. I'm very interested in all of these aspects. And my journey in my own life has led me to look and examine a lot of these things. And I've come to realise that it's not just a matter of belief and what we believe. My tradition for a long time was that everything was based on faith and believing one core sort of belief, which should not really be deviated from. I don't prescribe to that kind of philosophy anymore, because I see truth wherever I go, in whatever field I look. I see truth in things like science. I find truth in things like philosophy. I do find truth in religion. I do find truth in the indigenous beliefs of many, if not all, of the different parts of the world and different peoples of the world. So I'm not going to come to you and say I'm an expert on anything in particular at all. But what I am is I'm a seeker of the truth, and I am a person who's on a journey. I'm not claiming to be a yogi, I'm not claiming to be a guru, I'm not claiming to be a mystic. But in some ways, you could say maybe I am many of those things. But this is just my personal story. I'm not just interested in my own personal story, I'm interested in what everyone else has to say as well. And I firmly believe that before we can speak and broadcast our own ideas and philosophies, then we need to listen to what others have to say as well. And I've made it my ambition, if you like, to open up these ears and to listen to what others have to say as well. So how did I start on this journey? Well, I came from a family that was fairly open to a lot of different things, a lot of different beliefs. A child of the 1960s originally, growing up in the 1970s and 80s as well. And I came across a lot of different things. I had a family that was fairly open, as I say, but it was also had elements of our sort of our national religion, if you like, which was the Anglican Church of England, and then sort of things like the Methodist Church as well. I had family who were very interested in things like astrology, spiritualism as well. And I had friends that, as I was growing up, were had in their family things like Hinduism and also like humanism as well. And I was interested in all of these different beliefs. As a teenager, I discovered evangelical Christianity, and I threw myself in hook, line and sinker into that and followed that path for a long time, and I learned a tremendous amount of things. I'm not here to criticise that belief system. I'm not here to criticise any particular religion or tradition at all. In fact, one of my great gurus who I follow is Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ, because I think what he had to say was absolutely profound. It wasn't accepted well at the time, and in my opinion, his teachings have not really been very well taught and substantiated by even those who would call themselves after the religion that was set up after his death, which became known as Christianity and its various different guises. I am interested in what the man himself had to say because it's that deeply profound, and he is a figure not just in Christianity, but a historical figure and a figure that's also features prominently in other religions and religious traditions. He is a person who has been identified as having travelled as well. There's a period of his history, of his life, that's not recorded in the Bible, but was recorded in other traditions in other parts of the world, namely India, Tibet, Nepal, places like that. And I fully believe that he was a scholar of many of the Eastern traditions, which he then took back to his homeland in the Middle East, the Levant, Israel, Judea, whatever it was called at the time. And I believe that the people at the time weren't really ready, most of them, to accept what he had to say. Thank goodness we do have a record of what he said and what he did in the Bible, but also in a number of other apocryphal books which were discovered much more recently in our history, and it's interesting to read those and know more about that as well. The church, before it was really called the church, the groups of believers in what Jesus had to say, they were very much following not a structured, organised religion with churches, clergy, hierarchy, things like this. They were very much more a brotherhood, a sisterhood, where male and female were far more equal than in the area where they grew up. And certainly from what he taught, the mystical Christian or Jesus-based, Yeshua-based almost cult that grew up around his beliefs and teachings was very different, as I said, to what was later on established, certainly under the Romans, under Emperor Constantine, things like that, when it became an almost a controlling religion and belief system that was actually forced upon those people to which the Roman Empire went as a means of law and order, enforcing a peace, etc. And of course, there were a lot of good things in that, but there were also a lot of deviations from the original teachings of Jesus, who of course was an absolute pacifist, an absolute peaceful man, peace-loving person who did not at all agree with the historical, the story that happened, the things that happened through what became known as the church later on. And I really believe that he certainly would not advocate most of the historical events that took place in the name of this religion of Christianity later on. But that's just a part of my story, my involvement in that. And because I studied Christianity, I studied the Bible very closely. I am a scholar of the Bible, do have read it many, many times, and I am familiar with it. But I realised that in the period of time that I was involved with that and the evangelical fundamentalist Christian movement here in the UK, and also in the connections in the United States as well, that I neglected to continue my search in other traditions and other parts of the world and other different belief systems, and certainly even in my own native lands of the British Isles, where we have our own indigenous beliefs that predate the Christian influence by at least 2,000 years, probably much longer. And of course, we know that there are spiritual and mystical, religious traditions in the East. And I've gone through and I've looked at a lot of these things, and I have mentioned a lot of these beliefs as well in my previous videos. And no doubt I will continue to look at those because there's so much truth in them. But one thing that I will say is the more I have studied the different schools of thought, belief, philosophy, and spiritual traditions, mystical traditions, etc., is that there is a common truth, a common strand that goes through all of the different spiritual traditions in the world. And that is that mankind, humanity, we are very much connected with the earth, with nature, with the what we see around us and what we also can't see. Now, some will bring up God, some will bring up a source, a truth that transcends this world and the powers that sort of created the universe and brought it all into existence. And certainly every belief system has a mythology, has a belief system, has a tradition of a creation story as well, and how we all came to be. And a lot more more than not have a belief that the divine, the God self, actually dwells within us all. And indeed, Jesus Christ himself said that the kingdom of God is within us. In fact, he spoke in many of his texts and many of his discourses that God actually dwells within us, and that we are indeed are God ourselves. The church tried to a lot bury that and wasn't interested in hearing that side of it, because that then makes us all equal, which I fundamentally believe is absolutely true. I don't believe in any hierarchy of, certainly of clergy or priests or spiritual leaders. I believe that we should all be seeking truth for ourselves independently, that we don't need somebody to come along and tell us how it's done and tell us what rules there are to follow. In fact, I think one of the biggest mistakes is if we actually set out a set of rules and say, we will do this, we must do this, we must not do that, because all that sets up then is a precedent to separate us as human beings from those that manage to do it and those who don't manage to obey those rules. And division is the last thing we want. Certainly now in the 21st century, I'm seeing a lot of division around the world. People want to be very nationalistic. They want to look to themselves, their own indigenous people, their own race, their own nationality and things like this. When really, if we could just get back to what the basic message of nature is, that we as human beings are all one species. We are all the same. We are all part of the creation. We are all part of nature. So over the next few months, I'm going to be exploring this topic more. I'd like to see this as a little bit of an introduction. As I say, I don't see myself as part of any particular group, religion, sect, cult, strand of belief, etc. But I revere many of the aspects of lots of different religions and traditions. But one thing that I do believe is that none of them go far enough, because we are all basically one. The divine lives within us all. The divine surrounds us. And I want to get back to the point where I can find the truth in my own life. And I want to share my journey with you guys as well. So if you're interested in this particular topic, I'll be very pleased if you could maybe give us a thumbs up, a like. If you have any comments or even any constructive suggestions about this particular topic, then I'd be very interested to hear from you. If this does interest you and you haven't already subscribed, then please hit the subscribe button as well. But I'm going to leave it there for now. If you're interested, I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love you to join me on this particular quest for truth that I am about to embark on in 2026. So thank you for listening, and this is Johnny checking out for now.